Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Harnessing the Power of StatsAmerica to Support Nuclear Host Communities. I'm Brett Schwartz, Associate Director at the NATO Research Foundation. We're really happy to be bringing you today's webinar as part of the Nuclear Communities Assistance Project, which is funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Now, this program is led by Smart Growth America with support from the Nuclear Decommissioning Collaborative, Center for Creative Land Recycling, and the NATO Research Foundation. Now, our team provides free technical assistance, training, resources, and much more to help nuclear host communities better prepare for the future through resilience planning and diversification efforts. We believe that whether plant closure is imminent or not anticipated for many years, it's never too early to start planning for the future of your community. And as you know, without a solid understanding of key metrics, trends, demographics, and more, communities and regions are a major disadvantage in planning for the future. Fortunately, there are a variety of free data tools and services available for communities to explore. And today we're so glad to be featuring one of the most used and most trusted, and that is StatsAmerica. Since 2008, the goal of StatsAmerica has been to provide actionable data for economic developers and planners to use in site requests, developing metrics, grant writing, and strategic planning. And today you'll learn more about StatsAmerica, see a demo of its key tools, and get a sneak peek at a new resource being developed specifically to support nuclear host communities with planning and their research. So before we get to our presentation, I want to share a few framing remarks about our technical assistance program and how we can provide support to your organization and community. So here are just a few of the ways that we're providing assistance to nuclear communities through this program. We host frequent webinars like this one. We have a monthly newsletter, and also have a website with resources and archives online that have case studies, reports, blog posts, and much more. We're also providing a technical assistance program for interested communities and regions. And we're also building out a community of practice so that we can all learn from and lean on each other as we're going through this process. Again, the services provided by our team are free of charge, as this program is funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Additionally, EDA is providing funding through its own Nuclear Communities funding stream, which was announced in May 2020 to support communities and regions home to nuclear plants. And our team is here to help you navigate this funding source as you consider your options and project ideas. To date, there have been 8 awards made under EDA's Nuclear Communities funding stream. And we've written short snapshots of each of them to demonstrate and share the possibilities that exist through this grant opportunity, which range from planning and feasibility studies all the way up to large physical infrastructure improvements. All of these in an effort to support diversification and resilience. So I hope you can head over after the webinar to the website at Smart Growth America to get more information about the program and request assistance if you're interested. We'd really look forward to hear from you. So just a few quick logistics before we really kick things off. Again, thanks so much for being here with us today. If you have any questions for our trainer during the session, feel free to type them in the questions box on the right side of your screen in that drop-down menu. The slides and recording of this webinar will be made available very soon, posted both on NATO's website as well as Smart Growth America's website. And we also, at the end of the webinar, when you close out, there'll be a short survey that pops up on the screen. We hope you can take a few moments to fill that out to give us some feedback, to let us know how we can support your work in this space. And then finally, again, make sure to check out the website, smartgrowthamerica.org/nuclear, to get more information about our programs, upcoming events, and to sign up for that monthly newsletter to keep you updated on all that's coming your way. So with that, I'm really glad to welcome Carol Rogers, who is today's trainer. Carol is someone who I've known for many years, and I've really informed my thinking around data and mapping and a lot of these ideas that you'll be hearing about today. So I'm really thrilled Carol can join us. She is the co-director of the Indiana Business Research Center, which is based at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. Or University of Indiana, should make sure that's right.
Well, you were right.
Gotcha there. We'll fix that in the slides, don't worry, Carol. There at IBRC, she directs its information systems and services, oversees the development of websites, publications, training, research projects, and other services. Carol works extensively with economic developers, government officials, and businesses throughout Indiana and the nation, providing them with economic and demographic information. And under her direction, StatsAmerica has become one of the most used public data sites in the country. And really hope after today's session, you'll really understand why so many people turn to StatsAmerica as their go-to data resource. So with that, Carol, I will turn things over to you for the presentation. And thanks again for being here. Really looking forward to seeing some of the new updates on StatsAmerica and some of those resources specific to the folks on the call today. So thanks again.
Well, thank you so much, Brett, and welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar. I and my center and so many organizations that I work with really rely on NATO as a true partner in helping them to plan for the future, which is really critical to all of us. And I'm really pleased that we do partner with NATO and they provide us and you with these opportunities. With StatsAmerica, our goal is truly to provide usable information to people throughout the country, especially those involved in community or economic development, or people who are leaders in their communities, or organizations that are helping those communities to become more resilient and to thrive during these uncertain times and into the future. Because we never know, the future is always uncertain, right? So we're not always sure what's going to happen. It's really been interesting to us here at Indiana University to work as much as we do these days with more rural communities throughout the country, because they're, even with the challenges that most of us face today, I think many rural communities or communities with significant assets that border on the unique among communities across the country. So we were really intrigued when we were talking with Smart Growth America and with the nuclear decommissioning group about ways that we could help. And one of them was to think about putting out information that really ties the communities that have nuclear power energy in their community and tie the data more specifically to those communities. And I'm going to show you what we're doing to develop that tool. We're not ready for prime time with it, but I'll give you a sneak peek to it. And we're working with Smart Growth to really hone in and make sure that all of the descriptive language is accurate and that you have link backs to their websites as well as to NATO. First, I'd just like to introduce you, if you're not aware of it already, to StatsAmerica. We have long gotten support, investment support from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. They have helped us to grow this site and to make it as useful to economic development organizations as possible throughout the country. And we really appreciate the investment that they've made in this site over the years. And we just released a new site design. And what we're trying to do with this, and we hired a professional user experience specialist to help us with this and to test this with users. We want to make sure that folks can get to what they need on the site as quickly as possible. I encourage you to explore StatsAmerica for all kinds of things that might be able to help you. But I'm going to hone in today on a few profiles and a few tools that I think could be especially useful to you and to your community in terms of benchmarking where you are today and determining what kinds of metrics do you want to measure over the future years to see where you may have what I like to call opportunities and gaps. So the first thing I'm going to go to is actually the Anywhere USA profile. You might ask, why do we call it that? Oops, I need to show my screen. Thank you. We need the main screen. Okay, Brett, you should have hollered at me sooner.
No, it looks great, Cal. Go,
okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, I am so sorry, guys. Boy, my face is redder than it was. So anyway, let me go back to the homepage. So this is the StatsAmerica website. It's easy to get to. Just put in StatsAmerica.org and you'll get there. The tools are really easy to access. And where I'm going to take you first is through our profiles. And I wanted to get you quickly to data that you can use for your communities, many of which are city or town based places. With the Anywhere profile, and we call it Anywhere because we actually have a lot of different types of geography that you can look for. So it's not only cities and towns, but it's townships or boroughs, as some states call them, or other names that they might have. Economic development districts are here because that's really a core geography for us, so that most, if not all, of the data we provide will be available at that economic development district level, which is generally a combination of counties. As are micropolitan areas, metro areas, of course you can get any county you want, but you can also get school districts, which is kind of an unusual thing, but can wind up being really useful if you want to see how much of a place that school district comprises. We also have data for tribal areas, the off-reservation trust land only, census tracts, tribal tracts, and also tribal tract groups. So if there is anyone participating, either as an EDD or other type of organization, that data is there. I'm going to go ahead and just type in a name of a town. I'm just going to pick a town here in Indiana that's Bremen, Indiana. And you notice it doesn't show Bremen, Indiana. It shows the Bremen schools. But if I start typing in Bremen town, I get, so I do know that it's a town, and I get Brementown, Indiana. So it's really easy to type in a place name and then actually get data tables back that give you some of the most basic things that you need to know about a place at any point in time. How many people live there? In this town, it's 4,500 people. We're using the population estimates from the Census Bureau by age, and so that's why we're using the 2019 data. We don't yet have Census 2020 data by age group. Those should be released early next year, early in 2022. The other thing you want to know besides total size is just how young or old are we? Do we have a good balance of working age population as well as young people that are growing into adulthood, and many of whom may or may not stay in the community? And then also, how many potentially retired people do we have? And you notice that in the preschool age group, these are the two things I always look at right away. What proportion of the very young, under age 5, versus the over 65, do we have in a city or town? And you'll notice that in this particular town, the elderly population is significantly larger than that preschool. In certain communities, you're going to see double or triple the number of preschool, and it's just going to depend on the community. If you look at a bedroom community with a lot of suburban housing, you're probably going to see a much bigger skew toward younger than older. It just gives you a sense of what kinds of folks do you have living in that place. And you can also look at your populations in terms of their race and ethnic identification, in terms of what are the largest groups of people that we have in our community or region, and also how many of them identify as being Hispanic or Latino. And so that's what these data can provide. And what we do in the table is provide an easy way, an alphabetical way to look through the race groups to see how many persons identify in those ways. But we also provide percentages. And what's useful is that we provide a comparison to the United States overall. So does this place have a larger proportion, say, of persons who identify as just a single race, being white? And that's what the white alone means. It doesn't mean they live alone. It just means they only chose one race. You notice that there's the opportunity to show two or more race groups as well. And those are people who check multiple race identification boxes. So in this town, it's interesting that where the white population is at a larger proportion to the US compared to the US, this town has more multi-race identified people than the US does overall. And so I encourage you to look at these data and kind of just look at it, think about those proportions. Where are we similar to the US and where are we different? You can even get detail in terms of the Hispanic population because they may originate either recently or 20 years ago, because I know in Indiana we have a large Hispanic population that has been here, lived in Indiana for more than 20 years. So it's not an immigrant population. They've been here, they've set down roots, they've been here a long time. But it can be insightful to know the country of origin there, much as we can also use data from the census to consider what kind of ancestry people have. Also really helpful is the educational attainment of the population. Here we're using American Community Survey estimates, and we can tell pretty quickly what proportion of our population has less or more education. And so in looking at this small town in Indiana, again, it only has about 4,500 people, the preponderance of the population either has a high school diploma or a high school diploma, as well as some college or no degree. So we've got people there who stopped at high school, and then a large number of people who went to college, but they didn't get a degree. We know, for example, that a fair number of people go to our community college system in Indiana, but once they've taken on the coursework that can help them get a better job, they don't wait and get the associate's degree. Which is another category or level of education that people can get. So it's used very often as a proxy for kind of skill level, if you will, although there's a lot of work going on now across the country to try and get more certificate level information for employers. We also show you what types of households, living arrangements people have in the community. Housing units, are they owned, are they rented? How many are vacant for seasonal or recreation purposes? And then what type of housing? So is it single family? Is it multifamily? Is it really large apartment buildings? And we also provide a measure of how many of those units were built prior to 1940 to give a sense of the age of the housing stock. So these variables are really intended to give you a relatively quick picture of the community in terms of how large it is, how young or old, what the level of education and potential skill level is, what types of family or living arrangements are most popular in that community, and also how many people are commuting to work, and how many people now today, if we have these data for 2020, right now we won't get those until December, this number might look very different, right? Because of the pandemic shift for a lot of people to do remote work if they could. We also provide some insights into the types of occupations that people have. And then at the end of this particular profile, we encourage you to ask questions. You know, if you don't see something that you want, ask us. Oh gosh, I can't help it. I'm going to say, wait, there's more. Just like that commercial. You can also go to the comparison feature, and you can actually type in any city or town that you might want. So I'm going to pick Sausalito, California, because I was watching a TV show last night and I was wondering about Sausalito. And so it's not a huge town, but it is bigger than Bremen, Indiana. But you can see very quickly that you can compare any number of communities that you want to each other. And so I'm going to pick what used to be a place in Indiana that had a power plant, nuclear. It was almost finished, and then the state shut it down. And so that's Madison, Indiana, along the Ohio River here in Indiana. And so if one wanted to, one could type in the names of all of the communities in the country that have or do have a nuclear power station and compare their information side by side. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I welcome you, Brett, to bring those up, you or Kira, at any time. I'm going to switch now to some of the specialized tools that we have, and I'm going to flip over to the Big Radius tool. This is one of our most popular tools, in part because you're able to put in the name of a place. So I'm going to go with Madison City, Indiana again, down there by the Ohio River. And right now it's showing me within a 25-mile radius of Madison City, Indiana, the population that lives there. And hopefully you can see, I'll make my zoom a little bit bigger here. You can see the part of the area that's highlighted. We're actually summing up counties for this. That's why we call it the big radius. We're not trying to get a 1 mile or half-mile radius inside a city or a town. We're actually trying to take a bit bigger picture to show how many people live within a 25-mile radius of that center point for Madison City, and what's been the population growth rate, which are the largest counties in that region and their cities, which counties have had the largest 10-year growth. And I'll tell you, this is kind of interesting. So these counties in Kentucky and Indiana really are not growing very fast. The only one is Switzerland, Indiana, which actually grew over the past 10 years about 1%. And part of that is because there's a casino there. So I can give you a little bit of an inside scoop. So, you know, thinking about assets, in some ways, you know, those casinos are assets. How much labor force? How many people are employed? What's the employed rather? What's the unemployment rate? All of those details are there. But what's really sweet about this is that I can increase the size of the radius, and I can go from 25 to 50 to 75. I'm going to stop at 100. So you see that the highlighted area has gotten exponentially bigger. And suddenly, just within 100 miles, we find out, and let me make my zoom here a little bit smaller, make it easier to show you this more quickly. We went from, what was it, less than 100, it was around 113,000 people within 25 miles. Suddenly, within 100 miles, we've got 8.2 million people. And I can ratchet that down. Let's say we go to 75, and we see how many people live within a 75-mile radius, 4 million. So it did, just reducing at that 25 miles, cut the population in half. And that tells me something right away, that a lot of these counties have are less densely populated. They're probably more rural. And you can see this pretty starkly if I put in, let's say, Chicago, Illinois. And within a 75-mile radius of Chicago, we've got 10 million people. And you notice we don't have the red, doesn't cover, you know, the circle doesn't cover the lake. So we're not counting people that may have a houseboat along the shore. Within a 50-mile radius for Chicago, 9 million plus people live in that region. So it gives you an idea pretty quickly of how great a labor force capacity might you have for your city or town. And I'll go back to Sausalito, California here, just to show, you know, this is nationwide coverage. And 50 miles of Sausalito, they've got access to a lot more people and a much larger labor force. So a lot of this is just going to depend on where your community is located in the country. So if we went to Sweetwater County, Wyoming, I can guarantee without looking that the population is going to be pretty small. Okay, so 43,000 people within a 50-mile radius. But then we know that as you start getting out into the west, these counties get bigger, but that doesn't mean they have that many people living in them, especially in some of the more rural states. So hopefully that gave you a sense of how to use the big radius tool. I would also encourage you for your research around your community that has nuclear power to use the regionalizer tool. Now this is county based, so you're going to be looking at the county that your community is part of. But what's really handy about this, and I'll go ahead and zoom into Alabama, what's handy is that you can click on whichever counties you want to create your own region and get a lot more data at the same time. Now, let's say I wanted to also include early Georgia in this Alabama region. I can do that. I can cross state lines. I could even go like this and just click and drag. If for some reason I want to just be able to get all of that part of the state, I can do that, and I can click on and I needed to lift my mouse up. I'm going to get rid of those. You see how easy it is. And if I click on data, boom, I'm going to get a lot more data about that county or a bunch of counties if I need to kind of show the context of where that nuclear power station is, and I want to show the region that it's in. And so you can look at the data and kind of play around with this to see how many people live in that region as you define it, and get some really interesting data about veteran status, whether people are native born or not, health insurance coverage, disability status, a lot more housing data, especially around the age of the housing stock, much more detailed commuting information, as well as looking at the occupation clusters in your community and being able to see which ones employ the highest numbers of people in your particular region. So that's one reason that I wanted to focus on those 3 different tools. We have multiple other types of profiles, other tools like APRID, which is really looking at resilience around national disasters. We have the measuring distress tool, which is helpful for selecting a region, for example, and being able to get the threshold measures that are required to qualify for certain federal grants. So there's a lot of information here. You can also download mass quantities of data. But I think for your purposes, one last thing I'd like to show you is a specific profile that we're working on for what we're calling resilient power generation communities. So here, again, we can either zoom into a state or we can actually just select based on where we've spotted some of these locations on this map and be able to get the data. And so you notice I clicked on it, I got the data, and then I'm able to look at, because I wound up clicking on it twice, so look what happened. I got Richland City twice. But these are actually specific for what some folks call the nuclear communities. And so we're providing similar demographics to what are in the regionizer profile. We would love to hear from you about what other data you would like to see in this particular profile. Do you want more labor force or workforce data? Would you like more demographic information? What is it that's going to help you with your planning, with information that you need to prepare to provide to council meetings or planning organizations, city or town or county leaders? Help us know what is it that you would want to know about your particular region and your particular community. Now, not all of the nuclear designated nuclear communities, some of them are in what are called census designated places. So they're not legally incorporated places. And for those, what we wound up doing, and I can't tell you which ones they are right offhand, but what we wound up doing is pinpointing the nearest legally incorporated place to them. That may be something that we need to refine. We're working with the folks at Smart Growth America and Terry Mincer. Do you know her, Brad?
I do, yeah. Terry's our project lead.
So we're working with Terry, we're working with Brad, and what we'd like to do is release this soon and then start getting feedback from Terry, from Brad, and from you all about what else you would like to see in this particular profile. And unless you think there's anything else that I really should hone into, Brett, why don't we open it up to questions?
Excellent, great. Well, Carol, thanks so much as always for a great demo, and it's really exciting to see some of the new capacity and design of StatsAmerica. This is really great. So yeah, I just want to echo Carol on 2 fronts. First, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box. I have a few that came through we'll get to in a moment. And also, of course, to please provide any sort of feedback. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with the StatsAmerica team for many years, and they are so receptive to feedback, to figuring out how to make sure that this information is responsive to what you're working on, what your needs are. So a lot of ways to do that, obviously, through the website. Again, that survey after the webinar that pops up. There'll be a chance for you to type in some information, of course, right now, if you want to give us some kind of real-time thoughts about what you're looking for. So again, feel free to type in some questions, and I'll get to a few that came through during the presentation, Carol. And one just came in early, was just about asking about updates to the site. And of course, there's a whole slew of new information that's going to be coming out from the previous census and other resources. I think you might have mentioned December as a target date, but what are you hearing, and what are your thoughts about when the latest kind of census information will be available through StatsAmerica?
Well, and that's a really good question. The data that has, and just so people know, I'm also the Indiana governor's census liaison. I tell you that just so you know I have a really tight relationship with the Census Bureau, and I have to monitor that for us. The 2020 census counts have been released. First by state for apportionment purposes. You know, do you keep all your seats or do you lose one? New York lost one, California gained, I think 2, I can't remember. A new batch of what's called redistricting data was just released in August. That's a very narrow data set that focuses on total population, population by race, as well as the population 18 and older. And the reason they do that is because that's the voting age population. So it's a pretty narrow data set and really honed in on helping legislatures do redistricting for congressional districts, etc. The juicy stuff isn't going to come out until probably, we're hoping starting in February, where we're going to get some big files, because that's what we want. We want these big files that we download, because we get the data for the whole country. And then we're going to be able to repopulate things like the population by age with the 2020 census count, as opposed to the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. Same thing is going to hold true with race, so we're going to use a count instead of an estimate, but it stops there when it comes to the education attainment, because we can only get that from the American Community Survey. That'll be updated this December. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the count that was done and then the estimates that come out every year. And we update these things probably within 24 to 48 hours of when we actually get the data from the source. So if the Census Bureau releases it at 10 o'clock in the morning, depending on the size of the file, etc., we'll most likely within a day or two, you will see it released on StatsAmerica. You can see that happen constantly, and you can always keep an eye on us and see if you can catch us out on anything. But with the county profiles, we rely on a whole bunch of sources for the county profiles. So we're getting income and poverty data from the Census Bureau, but also from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. We get the jobs and wages data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, labor force data, the same thing. And it's all updated, again, within that 24 to 48 hour cycle once the source releases it.
Great.
And we've got a whole massive calendaring workflow, automated workflow tracker. It's kind of like in our DNA. That's what we do. We get those data updated.
Great, Cal. Thanks for that update. And I guess kind of a similar kind of technical question that came in asking about, you know, how do you cite these sources? I think a lot of folks are interested in kind of embedding this, or I know there's a download, either the Word or the Excel that can be dropped into a SEDS or a regional plan or something else. But someone asked about, do people cite StatsAmerica? Do you cite the original source? Kind of how's the best way to make sure that?
We recommend that you do both. that you say from StatsAmerica using U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey estimates.
Great.
So that's how we recommend that you cite it, so that people know it came from StatsAmerica and not from that literal file at the Census Bureau. I also encourage people, even if you're using data from a source website like the Census Bureau, that you say things like source, data.census.gov, using the American Community Survey estimates. Because every now and then there is going to be an issue. There was an issue with the redistricting data, for example, last week, and the Bureau had to go in and do some things to what they had been feeding the data.census.gov site of theirs. It's their site, but something went wrong, and they had to reissue it.
Great. Again, I encourage anyone to type their questions into the questions box, and we've got a few more minutes to get through them. There's a broad question here that came through, Carol, asking about, I'm interested in workforce information and looking at industries in my region. Which is the best tool? And I know a lot of these, kind of data sets, overlap across the tools, but if you could recommend one, I guess, on kind of workforce issues, where would you kind of go first?
I might start with the innovation intelligence tool. And let me tell you why that might be. Now, it is restricted at the county level, so it's not going to give you city data. But then again, if you're interested in workforce, many of us rely on multiple counties for our workforce. We can only rely on our own county for our residents, but we have workers who come and go. And with the innovation measures that we have here, at the county level, it can really give you a much keener sense of where you are across the country compared to everybody else and to those around you in terms of, say, high school attainment. In this case with the map, the lower the number, the higher the density of high school only. Okay, so think of it that way. Some college attainment, I mentioned this earlier with one of the profiles. The Western states have really tackled the some college thing. The Northwest or North Middle states really seem to nail it, along with some of the counties in the Northeast, the associate's degree attainment. With bachelor's degree attainment, you're going to notice that it's relatively well spread out. You've got some areas where you've got higher density of bachelor's degree attainment than other places, and probably in every state you're going to have that. But in some of these states, it's also because they have a university. Graduate degree attainment, a little bit different picture. And by looking for your particular county, let's look at Weld County, Colorado. I'm going to click on it and notice that it turned red. So that tells me, okay, I'm looking at that county now compared to every place else. And I can see that with, let's look at patent technology diffusion. Most of these counties are not dark. They don't have a high diffusion measure. But if I click here on comparative, what it's going to do, if I go back and I'll talk to our programmer about that. We should have kept the selected county. I'll pick Beaver County, Utah. Notice the color pattern changes, and immediately we're giving it to you in three simple ways. These are all the counties that are well below Beaver County, Utah, the ones that are within 10 points, so very like Beaver County, and then the dark blue ones are the ones, and do you even see any dark blue? Well, I don't even see any dark blue on this measure. would be the ones that would be above. And so with things like STEM education and STEM occupations, that's going to get you into the workforce. Average prime working age. If you delve into many of these measures, you'll get a much deeper sense of not only workforce, but also innovation capacity. So I hope that helped a little bit. That would probably be one thing I'd look at. And then I would want to go through the county profile and really dig into the jobs and wages, the labor force, the commuting data.
Excellent, great, thanks, Carol. I've been monitoring the chat. There's a question that came through actually on a topic that we've been discussing ourselves, and I just want to read the question to make sure I cover all that's in here. But the question says, there's a new executive order advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Some of the data that the executive order specifies at the level of assessment is hard to come by. Does StatsAmerica have data on areas defined as rural, for example? What about those with disabilities or disabled populations? The executive order is also looking for data on LGBTQ+ populations. Is there data for that? If not, are there sources for these that you can suggest? And Carol, I know from our conversations, we've been looking at ways to kind of enhance StatsAmerica and the mapping around some of these issues, but would love to kind of hear your kind of initial thoughts on this, which again is a priority of the administration.
And it's really an important thing, and I'm going to go back to the innovation and intelligence because I want to just talk about the tool and some of what we want to do around diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to help people with these data is to start pulling in more of what we call cross-tabulation. So instead of just income by race, by ethnicity, by gender, by disability status, by some of these things, certain groups that have been historically excluded, and show them in a map-based form, whether it's by county or metro area or district. And I'd be curious to know if any of you would like to see it that way. I think it could be really helpful to show segregation indexes in this way. And we'd like to create an economic inclusion index that would be similar to the innovation, but really focuses on how inclusive is a county's economy. And that's where we need to be pulling in data on occupation by race and sex, etc. We need those cross tabulations. We can get them. They're harder to work with, but it's going to be worth it. And much of this is kind of buried in census data, in the American Community Survey data, in the public use microdata sample data, and other sources. With the LGBTQ, and I apologize if I didn't say that fast enough or right enough. With that, we're trying to tease some of that out of census data, but we ourselves are looking for better, more reliable sources of it. Part of the challenge is that the federal statistical system, as well as post-secondary education systems, really haven't been tracking that. They haven't tracked it at the level of detail that we really need. If you think about US Bureau of Labor Statistics data, you can't get labor force and employment by race, sex, or age. You get those data every month of who's unemployed and who's employed, but you don't know what types of people are employed or unemployed. Some of what we've been using is BLS state level data around race and gender, and looking at the disparity of employment and reemployment by those characteristics. So that would be one thing. How about I put something together that you could send out, Brett, with some suggestions for what people could do now?
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great, Carol. Yeah, thanks so much. And obviously a really important conversation and excited to see how we can kind of leverage all the tools already in place and the resources there, but also recognizing that there's much more that needs to be done and analyzed to kind of get to where we need to be. So great question there. We've got one final question, which kind of goes back to what was asked earlier. Just Carol, if you could just remind us, citing the U.S. Census kind of publicly with this information, what was the kind of language again that you used?
Oh, okay. And I was realizing we probably should put that either in our about page or somewhere here on the page. So we'll help people with that. But our preferred is source : StatsAmerica, using, and we tell you on the screen what data are being used by the variety of agencies. So let me pick a table here. I'll go to the county profiles. I'll get a profile. And so if we look at, say, living arrangements, it'll say Census Bureau. In some cases, it'll say Census Bureau American Community Survey. So StatsAmerica, using U.S. Census Bureau data, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's like a double citation.
Okay. Perfect. Great. Well, Carol, looks like we're come to the end of our questions. We're getting near the end of the hour as well. Just want to thank you so much for this demo and the entire kind of StatsAmerica team at IBRC, the work that you're doing, putting it out there, keeping us all updated on this information. So I just want to give you a quick second, any kind of final thoughts here on kind of next steps. Again, we know we'll keep an eye out and we'll certainly share with this group and others through the website.
We want to know, what do you want? What do you want? As long as it's not ice cream or cake, because I'm on a diet.
Excellent, great. So yeah, we're going to continue the conversation here as well. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Hope this was a valuable session. Get a little taste of it. You could spend a whole afternoon kind of really getting into the nuts and bolts of this, and just so best thing to do if this is your first time kind of seeing StatsAmerica or haven't visited in a while, is just to like go in and play around and kind of have some fun with it and see what's working and what's not. And again, you know, kind of keep the group informed on that front too. So again, there'll be a quick survey pops up as we close out right now. Carol, I want to thank you again so much. I couldn't help but noticing it said 79 and sunny at the bottom of your screen, so it's like a beautiful day. So I hope you go out and enjoy the rest of your day. I hope everyone else does as well. And we'll be in touch. Please keep us posted. Reach out to us on this whole Nuclear Communities team. We're here to support you. So on that note, thanks again. And until next time, take care. Thanks, Carol.